Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Soldiers to Sidelines webinar, Coaching Legends and American Heroes. I'm Harrison Bernstein, founder and executive director of Soldiers to Sidelines, and I'm so grateful for everyone's attendance tonight. And this is going to be an awesome show. We are going to focus on the concept of drive and really what allows us to accomplish so much in a day, in a month, in a year, or in a lifetime. And we have two incredible guests tonight that have accomplished so much. We have Koma Gandy and Dawn Halfaker. And Koma is the head coach of the All Navy's men's rugby program, which represents the U.S. Navy in the annual Armed Forces Men's Rugby Championship competition. Koma's coaching experience also includes work with the U.S. Women's National Team Pathway Program, Women's Club All-Star Program, appearances at the USA Club National 7 tournament, including a top 10 finish and Misfits Caribbean rugby program at the World Rugby Sevens tournament in Grenada. Koma has also completed coaching education work, shadowing programs with the U.S. men's and women's Olympic programs in Chula Vista, California, with the Connacht Rugby, one of the 4 provincial rugby teams in Ireland that competes in the United Rugby Championship and European Rugby Champions Cup. And we are also so grateful that Koma also presented in our inaugural rugby coaching certification seminar earlier this year in January. So Koma brought all of this wisdom to our soldier coaches. Koma's playing career spans over 2 decades with experience at the club and domestic elite levels of competition. 10 years as part of the international touring side Atlantis Rugby, and 3 years in the USA national team sevens a side pool, and 2 national championships with the New York Rugby Club of the Women's Premier League, the highest level of domestic competition for the women's 15-a-side rugby. Koma is an independent director on the board of directors of USA Rugby, the national governing body of rugby in the United States, and a member of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Koma was commissioned as an ensign after successful completion of the NROTC program at Harvard University in the early days of women serving aboard combatant ships. Koma served as a surface warfare officer in the active duty and reserve components for 14 years, attaining the rank of lieutenant commander. Koma is currently the vice president and head of curriculum at Code Academy, where she leads and manages a diverse, high-functioning team that delivers best-in-class interactive educational content in high-demand skills and technologies to a global learning community. Her prior professional experience includes leadership roles at EY and Morgan Stanley, where she led teams that delivered solutions integrating cutting-edge technology, new business processes, and industry best practices. In addition to her work in financial services, Koma has extensive business government experience gained from her time at the Cohen Group, where she advised domestic and international clients in the aerospace and defense industries, and projects in information security with Booz Allen Hamilton, where she advised Department of Defense and Department of the Navy clients on matters pertaining to wireless networks, cybersecurity, and biometrics. Koma has a BA from Harvard University and an MBA from Georgetown University, and sits on the board of many nonprofits. So Koma, we are so grateful to have you back with us again.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Koma. And joining Koma is Dawn Halfaker, who is the founder and chief executive officer of Halfaker and Associates, an award-winning professional services and technology solutions firm she founded in 2006, which provides leading-edge innovative technology solutions to government organizations. Under Dawn's leadership, the company achieved extraordinary success and growth and was acquired by SAIC in July 2021, where she currently serves as vice president. Dawn is currently the founder and managing member of Halfco Holding, LLC, a private family office investment firm managing the assets of Dawn Halfaker and her family. Prior to starting Halfaker and Associates, Dawn consulted on several projects with DARPA, Defense Sciences Office, and was focused on medical research and technology to enhance warfighter capabilities and save lives on the battlefield. Dawn also interned as a military liaison to the House Armed Service Committee, where she advised the committee chair on key Department of Defense legislation and issues. Dawn has served as a military police officer in the United States Army. Throughout her military career, Dawn earned respect as a dynamic leader of men and women in combat, peacekeeping, and in training in the United States, South Korea, Kuwait, and Iraq. While in the military, Dawn held several leadership positions and deployed to Iraq with the 3rd Infantry Division, where she commanded a military police platoon in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. She was subsequently wounded during a combat patrol near Baghdad in 2004, earning a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star for her service. Dawn remains active supporting numerous civic, cultural, and business organizations and is a staunch advocate for veterans and wounded warriors. Specifically, Dawn is the vice president for the Vail Veterans Program Board of Directors and is a member of the USO Board of Governors. And I believe you're preparing for a gala tomorrow night, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for making this time to be with us. Previously, Dawn served as a member of the advisory board for Thanks USA, served as a member of the Department of Defense Reserve Forces Policy Board, and serves as chairwoman of the board of directors for the Wounded Warrior Project, where she focused on raising awareness and enlisting the public's aid for the needs of severely injured servicemen and women. And thank you for that service, because the Wounded Warrior Project is a dear partner sponsor of Soldiers to Sidelines. So your leadership has brought us all together here in the future. Dawn holds a Bachelor's of Science degree from the United States Military Academy at West Point and a Master of Arts in Security Studies from Georgetown Universities in Washington, D.C. So it's awesome to have two Hoyas here on the call. In 2017, Dawn was recognized as the Greater Washington GovCon Executive of the Year, and some of her accomplishments are just extensive. So without listing all of these, it's just such an honor to have you. In 2011, she was awarded Fortune Most Powerful Women Entrepreneurs, and in 2011, Worth Magazine Top Entrepreneurs to Watch. She's just been featured on several media outlets, including HBO, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, Huffington Post, and the New York Times. So, Dawn, thank you so much for being with us, and can't wait to hear about your drive.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, my mouth is sore from reading those bios because it was extensive. And I just can't help to think, like, in your lifetime and throughout your lifetime, each of you have accomplished so much. So there's got to be this innate drive that you have. And we want to tap into what drives you. And before we do that, aside from this drive, what is your secret to being able to accomplish so much? And I'm just going to turn that over to Koma first and get your reaction.
Well, first of all, thanks again for having me. It's really a pleasure to spend time with everybody this evening. I think for me, the drive came from somewhere within where I've been a competitive athlete for my entire life. And even though I'm in the twilight of my athletic career, I still try to do a 5K or a 10K every so often. It came from I would say, the enjoyment and the passion that I derived from being part of a team and what that team was able to achieve when we could work together. And when I was in high school, I was a 3-sport athlete, but the sport that I thought kind of taught me a lot of things just about sacrifice and about pushing through personal boundaries. I was on the crew team, which anybody who's familiar with rowing, it is a difficult sport. Not that any sport is difficult, but it's particularly masochistic. And the crew that I was on was coached by somebody that was extremely well known in the sport. And for me, it was something that was completely new. I'd never pulled on an oar before I had gotten to high school. And I found that I was pretty good at it, but it was also one of the most tangible examples of when a team actually is all working together, because you can actually feel the boat fly through the water. You can actually feel physically what happens when a team is out of sync, when a team is not working together, where people's heads are in different places. And I think for me, that was one of the first introductions of that sort of that drive, but also that high that you can get when you're part of a team. That team is working together, that's motivated towards a common goal. And in that case, it was sort of a physical feeling, but it's also just a mental feeling of being connected to a group of people who are like-minded, that are moving towards the same direction, and they're all putting everything that they can into that space in order to be the best versions of themselves that they can be. And as far as accomplishing things, I got this wrong probably early in my career, where I felt like I had to be all things to all people. And what I realized was that if my passion wasn't present, then it would be much more difficult for me to push that thing over the finish line or to get that thing done. And I think that was one of the best opportunities for me to really understand how focus, passion, and drive can all come together to help you be more effective, but also help you get more things done. So those would be sort of the two things that early in my athletic career before I met rugby, a tangible example for me of what it felt like to be part of a group that was completely aligned and completely directed towards a common goal. And then what happens when one of those pieces isn't present, that the focus and the passion and being surrounded by the right people can make all the difference in the world in feeding that energy for you to be able to feel like you can, climb mountains and conquer whatever shows up in front of you.
Wow, Koma, when I hear that story, I can't help but think of the quote, the strength of the wolf is in the pack, and the strength of the pack is in the wolf. And your example of the crew team and putting the oars in the water, it's like we have to be the best version of ourselves. And you, when I hear you speak, like if you can just dial into our true passions, that like strengthens you to give more to the team, so that you can make the team better, you won't let the team down, but then the team responds reciprocally, and then there becomes like the synergistic alignment, and then your bio emerges from all of the work that you have put in, but together with everybody around you. Really cool.
Agreed. I think that is a lesson that I know that I have learned and I continue to learn, that helps me figure out where I can direct my efforts and where I can be most effective, and where maybe it's an opportunity for somebody else to step up where they can be most effective because that's where their strength lies. I think one of the things that when I talk to my team, especially with the all Navy team, because we're coming from all over, I said, all of you have superpowers and all of you have work-ons. So it's up to us to facilitate the best environment for you to be able to realize those superpowers, and we can maximize those. And that's what the coaching staff is really there to do. And then we can identify those work-ons so that we can actually help you become, in this case, a better athlete or a better teammate. But bringing those superpowers together and finding that combination, the right combination, makes the entire team better. And that's putting people in that space is really important to feel like they're empowered to demonstrate that.
Great point. So Dawn, as you hear all this, what has been the secrets to your drive and your accomplishments? And especially now after you've heard Koma's reaction.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a tough act to follow anything Koma's doing, let alone, just an opening question.
Right back at you, John. I've seen your bio, and every time I find a new thing, I'm like, wow. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, no, the feeling is mutual, but no, it's interesting because as you were talking, I was like, wow, like, we really, I know when we put two speakers together, we're supposed to bring sort of diversity of thought and different perspectives here. But I would say that sort of, my drive, was early recognized, I think, in the sports realm. And I think the interesting thing about it is I sort of reflect back, Harrison, on the question is like, and as Koma said, I think as a young child, I was very competitive. And so, I happened to play sports. And, that's where that sort of competitiveness and really just that early drive was kind of nurtured. And so I look back and it was sports, but I think as it's sort of, as my life's evolved and as I'm no longer, really, I'll say it, a bona fide athlete, although in my head, I still am, but I'm really not. But yeah, it's sort of, it was interesting because I look back on how did I get to, sort of each place in my life, how did these opportunities arise? And, and I look back and I think it's sports, but as I heard Koma talking, I think it really is when I look back, well, what was it about, sports for me? I was always a team sport athlete. I really valued that. And, I remember just the feeling of, a team working together and, when it's all clicking, what are the things that you can accomplish? And, I think throughout my life, I ended up becoming a basketball player. I played basketball in college. And success, became relative. I played for Army. God bless us. The year I came in, the team had won one game. My freshman year, we won 5 games, and so I was, I was, quickly humbled. Let's put it that way. But seeing, kind of the evolution of where we could go, and when I look back, it was really about, I think, how we, how when you're with a team, you're surrounding yourself with, other great people. And as Koma kind of pointed out, you're able to draw on everyone's strengths to really like pull everything together to accomplish something special. And I think for me, I sort of translated that, that passion, that drive in athletics into, the military. And then quickly after that, after I was injured, into business. And so I think that drive and that idea behind teamwork and all the principles that I sort of learned in sports and athletics, now applying that to sort of entrepreneurship and leadership in the corporate world, it was really the same thing. It was like, business was a sport. It was my new sport, and let's figure out how we can win games, how we can take down opponents, how we can work together to bring out the best in everybody and accomplish the objectives that we've set forth, and really be a part of, something bigger than ourselves and do something unique together. And in our case, we were very focused on improving, really the healthcare system for our military and our veterans through technology. So I'll kind of pause there, but that's really when I reflect back, I think drive started and was nurtured with athletics, but then, sort of stayed with me. I am competitive, but it was really all about just, I think that feedback and that feeling of success and accomplishment and purpose and satisfaction you get from accomplishing an objective, whether it's winning a game or, winning a championship or, just, having success in business.
Really cool. So something's coming to mind here now. I hear this concept of this drive being innate within you. And I hear, sports was a great outlet for that. Like, so sports allowed you to express this drive. And both you and Koma are talking about this passion, right? Being like true to yourselves and going with that. So what are your thoughts then about how the lure and the drive to accomplish things, to make things happen, win, achieve, etc., combined with acting on a passion, like the things that you like to do, does that create like this tsunami of force that allows you to see all these projects through? And I'm directing right back at you, Koma.
Thinking about that, I think, I mean, there's always going to be aspects that are tough. There's always going to be unpleasant pieces of the puzzle that have to be solved. But I think, to your point, that if there is a convergence of that passion aligned with being with the right people, whether your team is 3 people or 300 people, that can create sort of a virtuous cycle of, even when things are difficult, there's an understanding of where you're trying to get to, and an understanding that it may not be a linear path in order to get there. And oftentimes, I know for me, that can make certain aspects, whether it's, let's say, logistical problems, traveling to a tournament, or something that just goes unexpectedly wrong, an opportunity that you apply for you don't get, or a tough loss that just feels like a big old kick in the teeth. That maintaining perspective that those types of experiences are part of a larger process is critical, because it is a continuous growth opportunity, especially when you are in positions of leadership, because not everything's going to go right. But I think as long as you can maintain a visibility into where you're trying to get to, then it makes those unexpected potholes or things that you didn't think were going to show up easier to work through. And those are the times when I think you learn the most about yourself. And I'm sure that, both Dawn and I have had plenty of those. But I feel like if you're surrounded with that combination of right team and passion, then maintaining direction, even if it's difficult, still can be done.
Yeah, so leadership and drive, really what I wanted to say is, the passion and the drive of accomplishment helps in the leadership, and not just the leaderships of others, but also the leadership of ourselves, so that when we're faced with these adversities, we can take this curvy linear path to really accomplish what we want to accomplish as individuals in our lives, but then what we can help steward and lead others through in their lives or in whatever mission we're working on together. And I mean, I just can't help but to then ask you, Dawn, how that affected you, especially during your time of service where you were confronted with, you know, a really challenging adversity in your injury. And how had that adversity strengthened you? And did that reveal like the ultimate drive power you have with your passion?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think there's a lot to be said, as Koma said, and I always said this in business, it's easy to be a leader when everything's going well, right? Real leadership is tested when things are not going well, or you're having to make difficult decisions, or business is going south, or whatever the challenge may be, right? I mean, and I think the other true test of leadership is really how well your troops or your team or your business colleagues, like, how well do they perform when you're not there, right? I think there's a couple ways to really look at that and test that. But I think, when I look back personally and had, more of a personal challenge, I was 24 years old. I got, I was on a patrol mission in Iraq. I got hit with an RPG on that patrol mission. It came through the front of my vehicle and hit me in the shoulder. And my life changed in a flash. And, I spent my 25th birthday in the hospital thinking my life was over. And, here I was, like a service member leading a platoon, doing what I love, playing on the all army basketball team, when I had time, like, things like that. And then all of a sudden I'm in a hospital bed and, I can't even like get up and walk around. I mean, it was very drastic life shift. And I think, we've all had situations in our lives where, we're, maybe you're not physically wounded or whatever it is, but we all have these challenges. And it's really a matter of like, all right, well, what do we do in the face of these challenges? And I think for me, a couple things happened. One, I really, when I got injured, I sort of looked at it like there's two paths here. My life can either be over, or I can look at all the things that I can still do. And again, luckily I had a great support team around me who, really encouraged me and again, like sort of picked me up and threw me on a treadmill and was like, get moving, like your life isn't over. Like, so I started to slowly realize, all the things I could do versus sitting there and just feeling sorry for myself for losing an arm and the fact that I wouldn't be able to shoot a basketball with my right hand anymore. Yeah, those are things that I miss, but I was able to sort of come out of these things also don't define me, and figuring out what does that new normal look like from, activities of daily living, but also like, what does that identity look like? And so I think for me, I was really, I really wanted to show people like, hey, this isn't going to hold me back. This isn't going to keep me down. So it was, very much a, sort of new lease on life situation, but also like, I didn't want to lose my sense of purpose, which, had been the military. So I really wanted to find ways to stay engaged and part of that mission. And so for me, sort of, they say necessity breeds innovation. I decided to start my own company, supporting DoD, supporting VA, being around service members, because I didn't want to lose that. That was, sort of my lifeline. And so, so for me, yeah, I think it's taking that, passion and purpose and pushing them together, and like, out pops, then you surround yourself with the right people and you can go off and do great things. So, so yeah, I have sort of a saying that I didn't make up, but a friend of mine said in a speech, and he said, I think it was really, about, sometimes it takes the death of a dream to realize your destiny. And, for me, that was very true. So I'll sort of pause with that.
I love that. Sometimes it takes the death of a dream to realize your destiny. Someone please write that down. It's super powerful. And in those moments, Dawn, how have your coaches influenced you in your drive to accomplish everything post military service? And were there any coaches that you recall that might have said words of encouragement when you were younger that helped you through your recovery?
Yeah, and I think coaching is obviously, I mean, looking back in my life, probably certainly one of the most valuable things that I've benefited from. And I think, just the role of a coach, and you already heard Koma talking about it. She said it brilliantly. It's really, somebody else can see, the potential in you, your strengths, and really help you, give you the right environment to realize your full potential. And I think I had a lot of great coaching along the way, that really, enabled me to sort of push myself, bring myself out of my comfort zone, to push myself to accomplish things that, I may not have known were possible. And so I think that, it was interesting because throughout my my rehabilitation, I was privy to be, in a great hospital. I was at Walter Reed Military Medical Center, had great staff around me, but they quickly realized that I'm an athlete, like, at heart. And so everything we did was like, oh, like, we're going to start working on your recovery, but we're going to sort of trick you into doing it. And so it was like, oh, like, let's go, let's play basketball. You're going to try to use your left hand. They were trying to build strength in my left arm. We're going to use your left hand. Why don't you see if you can dribble by me? So it was all these things. And I really appreciated sort of the creativity of the staff. But I mean, essentially they were coaches. They were looking at me and saying, hey, like, how can I get you to your potential? How can I get you to that next step? How can I give you the strength you're going to need, to go, to essentially, reintegrate back into society on your own and be successful. But yeah, so I mean, I really appreciate just, the way I think coaches can really push you to a healthy level, that allows you to reach your full potential. But I think, looking back, there's kind of like two examples I think of, one of which I'll say was like one of those sort of, you could take it as like a negative comment. I took it as a little bit of a challenge, but when I told my high school basketball coach, she was really good friends with the coach at the time at San Diego State University, Beth Burns, who was recruiting me. San Diego State had by far at the time the best program that I was getting recruited into. I made the decision to go to West Point, and I know my high school coach was not happy because I think she really wanted me to go to state, and I would stay local. I'm from San Diego. I'd be local. I'd be playing for Beth and all these things. And I said, nope, I'm going to West Point. And she, I think, was kind of taken aback. And the first thing that came out of her mouth was like, "Beth, you'll never last." And and so that's always been in the back of my head. And and I don't want to sound like Michael Jordan in his Hall of Fame speech where it's like, oh, I'm going to bring up all the things anybody ever said to me that like made me want to work harder. But that was one thing. And she was a great coach. She coached me for 4 years, and we still have a great relationship. But it's just that little seed gets planted. I mean, who knows, she may have done it on purpose. But and again, it was just this example of just made me, always pushing me, maybe want to work harder. But I think on the flip side of that, I had coaches that I think really took chances on me, believed in me. On the flip side, I had an AAU basketball coach who, ironically, he called me Red, which I hated, but he called me that. And he actually had one leg. He was missing a leg. And the way he coached us in basketball was interesting. He, I really appreciate how he turned, he really focused basketball as a true team sport. And so he would basically put rules and parameters on how we could score baskets. This is even in a game. And he would say, you need to have so many touches. Everybody has to touch the ball. You can only shoot a layup, and you have to, whatever the parameters were. And if you didn't do that, he would take you out of the game. And we were literally like shooting layups every time. But what he was teaching us is he was really teaching us to work as a team. He was teaching us to get everybody involved. And he was teaching us that, the key to success in a team sport is working together, passing the ball, being unselfish, and finding opportunities for other people, and then also taking the shot when you had it, and so I think it was really, really valuable. And I remember when I got injured, it was just kind of one of these weird connections where he was a great coach, and I took a lot of what he gave me and really applied it, I think, in business tremendously. But ultimately, having somebody else who as I lost my arm, was an amputee and could sort of, have a personal connection and weigh in on that was really powerful for me. So it was like, looking back when I was a teenager, it was like, oh, this guy's yelling at me and calling me red and has one leg, but we're winning and I'm developing and this is great. But it turned out, who knew what was going to happen later in life and how we would reconnect and he would be such a support for me. So
Really
I don't
cool.
know if that's what you were looking for, Harrison, but
I'm not looking for anything. Really, what I was telling Koma early is both of you are these deep wells of wisdom, and it is my job to just cut the top off and just let it all come out, and we just try to collect as much as we can. So this conversation is taking us exactly in the direction we're supposed to go. Um, I hear, I know sports are just a great metaphor and an opportunity for us to learn all these tremendous life lessons, but like the sports don't actually get us better. Like basketball didn't get you better. It's the coaches who taught you and coached you and brought you through, and your teammates on the basketball court that revealed all these life lessons. And I loved hearing what you said about your high school coach, where doubt can be a powerful fuel to fire your drive. And if you're a driven person and some person doubts you, let it happen, because look where it takes you. So, Koma, I mean, you dedicated your life to coaching, right? And so you are a coach, you're an educator at the highest level. So, how has coaching influenced you, like the coaches in your life as a player, influenced your current coaching style now, and your vocation?
So, in terms of coaches that have influenced me, some have been those that I played for, and some that I had the opportunity to observe and shadow. And I think about a rugby coach who is extremely well known in the rugby community. In fact, he's known as sort of the godfather of seven-a-side rugby, which is a version that's in the Olympics. His name is Emil Cygnus. And he picked me out of a crowd when I was playing in a tournament many, many years ago in Las Vegas. And I got an email inviting me to attend an assembly, and we were going to be competing in a tournament. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this person actually A, saw me, B, thinks I'm good enough to play for him, and C, invited me to something. So off I go. And at that point in time, I played a particular position that was generally for speedy, fast people. And we're all sitting around, new teammates. I'm feeling totally intimidated. And he looks at me and he says, actually, you're this. And I looked at him, I'm like, I've never played that position in my life. He's like, well, yeah, well, that's what you are. I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess that's what we're going to go with. But what he recognized was that in certain circumstances, I wasn't actually being used to my full potential in terms of certain aspects of what I brought to the game. And that was a transformational moment because he saw me in a way that other coaches hadn't taken time to see me. And he put me in a place where I could be successful. And that's generally where I spent that particular position on the field, was where I spent the most time during the better part of my playing career, the most competitive part of my playing career. And I, was in my mind, I was just this rugby person that was playing, and I really enjoyed it, and I was just doing my best. And all of a sudden, this person picked me out of a crowd and said, hey, I think that you've got something. And I think for me, it influences my coaching to be able to look at the play behind the play, or what happened X number of plays beforehand, not just the person who scored, but what happened to set up that person to put them in the position that they could score, or what types of decisions were made prior to that event that facilitated our opportunity to be in a position to get on the scoreboard or to notch a particular to succeed in a particular circumstance. Another coach stressed the importance of running scenarios. So instead of just going out and practicing, it's, hey, you're down by 2, there's 2 minutes on the clock, and you have possession. What are you going to do? And what types of things are you thinking about, so that when that scenario actually presents itself to you, when you're in the stadium, when it is the Armed Forces Championship, you've actually gone through it and you know what to do. And it's sort of the expansion, like practice the way you play. Well, putting yourselves in different conditions, in different scenarios to force thinking, and not my thinking, it's the team. They have to go and solve the problem. They have to work amongst each other. They have to make mistakes. I have to give them the room to make mistakes and then allow them to problem solve so that when that shows up again, they have the confidence that they know how to work through it. And I think being able to work with coaches like that has influenced my ability in many cases. I think, Dawn, you mentioned, how does a team perform when you're not there? How does a team perform when I'm just silent and observing them? Do I allow them to solve their own problems? Do I allow them to make mistakes? If they make a mistake, how do I react to that mistake? Is it a learning opportunity, or do they get upset, or do I get upset and then they pull back into themselves and they're not the player that they could be because they're afraid of making a mistake? I think in prior experiences, I did have coaches that would hop on top of you when you made a mistake. And that is an incredibly difficult space to be in because you don't necessarily flex those muscles that allow you to do that problem solving so that you can become a better athlete, a better team member, a better coach. And I think for me, those were formative experiences with those coaches, both as a player and learning from them, to feel comfortable and secure that it is a learning process and it's going to take time for people to solve problems and work together, but being able to create the environment where they can do that problem solving in a space where they're free to make those mistakes will ultimately yield a better result both for the individual and for the team, because that team builds the confidence. Like you said, Don, what do they do when you're not there? I'm not on the pitch, and that's what I explained. I'm not playing rugby anymore. Too many squeaky things, too many trips to the chiropractor, and a couple of surgeries. It's my time in that venue is done. My job is to be able to create an atmosphere where you learn together so that when you get on the pitch and it's time to kick off, you feel like you have all the tools in your tool bag and the problem solving skills to be able to solve them. So that's kind of where I am on and that coaching continuum. Had I not had those coaches that gave me that rope and were able to see a different aspect of me standing outside myself, I don't know that I would have been the player or the coach that I am.
Wow, Koma, there's so much to dive into in from what you just said that I'm excited about. I I hear a little bit about what Dawn was saying, where sometimes the death of a dream leads you to your destiny, and sometimes we have these ideas as players in our minds, like I am this, right? Like I am a point guard, or I am a forward, or I'm a fly half. This is what I am, right? And then sometimes it's our coach. Then will say, no, no, you are this, like he did for you. And that in a sense can be a death of a dream, because it's like a shift in perspective of how I see myself as a player, right? And then I can't help but think about the role of coaching versus coachability. I shouldn't say versus, like the combination of those two things. Like, are we coachable in our drive to succeed? And can our coaches give us the space to learn and make mistakes? Right? Because with both of you, as we read those super impressive long bios, if you're just listening on this call and you're hearing that bio, it's like, oh, Dawn just, did all this awesome stuff. And like, here it is. It's just like, it seems linear. I woke up, I did this, I went to work, I work hard, I'm a good leader. And then I have Dawn's bio, I have Koma's bio, right? But both of you know that's not how it went. There was all of this learning and growing. So I got to figure out a way to ask these questions in order, because there's so much. Which coaches, or how have you let yourself make specific mistakes to accomplish the things that we have heard about on these resumes? Like, what were some of the things that were the misses that ultimately led to the accomplishments? Dawn, do you have? I'm sure you have a few of some of the missteps you've had along the way that revealed learning lessons that brought you in a different direction to achieve what we just read earlier.
Sure. Yeah. It's kind of like, where do I start? No, I'll just kind of run with the first thing that popped in my head. And it's sort of example in my military career. one of the things that I learned pretty quickly, I'll give a very real world example. But we were, I was in Iraq, and we were like kind of at a police station in the middle of a town called Bakuba. And we got a call came over the radio, and they said, hey, we need your trucks. We need you to go out and start patrolling and set up a perimeter around, sort of some of the, government buildings in the area, because we have a vehicle-borne IED via this van that is headed, toward you. And we believe that they're, trying to go blow up this, this building. And so, we said, okay, Roger, went and, initiated the patrol and set up this perimeter. And so as we were on watch, we had our trucks sort of lined up. We had, just different sectors of fire covered with, the different weapon systems that we had. And that was sort of fully deployed. And we were really sitting there to both act as a deterrent, to redirect traffic, and then to, look out for said vehicle-borne IED, as we called it. And so as we were sitting there, we had very strict, sort of rules of engagement. And as, we were looking at different vehicles, vehicles are coming at you. There was one vehicle in particular that sort of matched the description very closely of the vehicle that we were told, could be potentially dangerous. And so as we were sort of in this perimeter, one of the soldiers, as this vehicle was approaching, we had sort of a protocol that we would do in terms of trying to get the vehicle to stop, trying to get the vehicle to turn around, and then, using our weapons to disable the vehicle. And what ended up happening is, as the vehicle was approaching, one of the soldiers in my unit got a little nervous, fired a shot, and then that triggered the whole, really, it wasn't a full platoon, but, basically an entire squad I had to open fire on this vehicle. And, then after, the vehicle had clearly become disabled, getting them to cease fire and just realizing, sort of the challenges that I didn't necessarily anticipate as a leader in the what if scenario of thinking oh, okay, they all know the rules of engagement. Everybody understands what they're supposed to do. But once one shot is fired, what is that signaling to everybody else? And then how do we sort of maintain fire discipline? And then once, rounds are going, sort of downrange, and we're engaging, and it's loud and nobody can hear anything because you all have ear protection in, and I'm doing the ceasefire sign and they're not looking at me, they're all looking at the, at the vehicle-borne IED. That was just this huge lapse in sort of communication, hand and arm signals, the whole thing. And really, I think evidence that early on when we were over there, troops are nervous, shot gets fired, and, why that signaled, others to then engage and shoot their weapon, because they weren't shooting at us. And so anyway, it really, I think, was a wake-up call for me of, just the importance of, fire discipline communication. And I think that, I was able to kind of come back from that experience. I was very frustrated. I was very upset. I was upset with myself, for just not preparing obviously they weren't as prepared as they should have been for these types of situations. But I think that we were able to kind of learn from that experience and look at, how do we enhance our communication? What are the things we need to do? What do we need to do, put in place? What are sort of the, the rehearsals and things that we need to do beforehand in terms of really understanding our mission, our upwards, and our rules of engagement and things like that? And how do we really use the appropriate levels of force, and de-escalate where we can, and not escalate when we don't have to? And so anyway, I think a lot came out of that because, we faced a lot, much more, sort of serious and life-threatening situations on different missions that we were on at that point going forward. And so it was a really good, kind of wake up call. But, I think that as I, that lesson, I always think of things like, you remember, just some of the lessons that came out of a movie called Black Hawk Down, right? There's all these lessons you can apply of oh, you think you're going on this short mission and it's going to be easy. And, we don't really need to bring all the food or all the ammo, we'll be fine. We'll be in, we'll be out, and they very clearly articulated some of those lessons for us in that movie, but sort of feeling like, I had my own little, situation like that where, wow, like there's a lot of lessons in here. We need to figure out, how do we carry this forward, and then how do we teach others in terms of learning from these mistakes. And I think that, like, I even apply this stuff to business, because it's like, look, like, if we don't have a plan, we haven't rehearsed what it is that we need to do, just really being as prepared as you can, and making sure everybody understands, kind of the rules of engagement, if you will. That's something that's really always stuck with me. And I think that, that it's just helpful in life, right? Just to really know, different situations that you're getting into. And I think there's certainly a lot of applicability in coaching. You come down to a 2-minute drill in football, or you come down to, the last, 24 seconds, or, whatever that shot clock is in a basketball game. And Koma, I certainly appreciate that there's a rugby analogy of this, but, how is it that you've prepared, your team or your troops or, your business for those types of situations? So anyway, so that was a huge lessons learned for me, and something, that I'll never forget.
It seems like it was very powerful and impactful in your life. And have you applied that specific instance to any other specific instance in your business leadership as it relates to communication and preparation? Is there some specific thing that pops out into your mind where that's strictly related to?
Yeah, no, and Harrison, I think one of the biggest things that, as we were preparing to sell the business, and we had to do a lot of, what I think you guys probably recognize as like management presentations. We had some potential suitors, and, we had an opportunity to go, meet the investment banking team would set up these meetings. And we had 5 people on the deal team from our side, and we had to go within an hour, basically communicate the value and differentiators of our business. And, when you have an hour and you have, a very tight agenda, you have a presentation, but you really kind of have to deliver flawlessly. And so I think that the idea of how we were preparing, I mean, we even used, we came up with alternate communication signals if something was going south. If somebody, how are we constantly looking at each other? Nonverbal communication, verbal communication, and just really trying to prepare for every scenario. It's the proverbial, like, what happens when the vehicle-borne IED is coming at us. How do we make sure that the whole line just doesn't open up and we're not tripping all over ourselves? And so, I mean, I think that, while I didn't necessarily, although I have a lot of former military on my team, I didn't necessarily use that analogy with them, but that, that was definitely in the back of my head as we were preparing for these meetings, and just wanting to make sure that, we didn't blow our chances, and that we did the best job possible sort of communicating our value as a company, and why, they should be interested in buying us.
Great point. So, in the rest of our time here, I just want to open it up for 1 or 2 questions. We don't have that much time, but if anybody does have a question, please put a question mark in the chat. I will see that, and then ask you to unmute yourself so you can ask either one of our guests your question. And while those question marks start to populate, I want to pass the ball back over to Koma, because when I was hearing Dawn talk, and Koma, you just being such a distinguished coach, when can preparation paralyze your efficiency? Because it's like in sports, I know, at least as a football coach, I could be up all night. I could watch film incessantly, preparing for every single possible game situation. But when does that just become too much? You need to close the film and just get on with it.
Yeah, analysis paralysis is a thing. And for me, because I enjoy data, and that was part of what I brought to the table when I took over All Navy, was looking at specific data related to our performance, where we could quantify our performance and identify things that we could work on specifically. I think at some point you've got to accept the fact that the data cannot tell the entire story, because especially in sports, and very much so in business, there's going to be things that come in that you just can't plan for. And the best you can hope is that you've equipped the team to be able to embrace that uncertainty and problem solve their way out of it to affect the best possible outcome on any given day. I mean, one of the things that I definitely talk to the team about, especially preparing for the Armed Forces Championship, because it is, for a lot of folks, the biggest thing that they'll play in that year is I can't control the flip of a coin. I can't control the bounce of a ball. What we can do is put ourselves in the best possible situation to affect a victory or to come out where we need to. But I can't control everything. I can probably tell us, here are the things that will contribute to our success. Here are the things we need to work on. We need to make more completed passes. We need to make sure that every time we are behind their 22, that we come out with some sort of points, whether it's a 5-point try plus a 2-point conversion, things like that. But I can't control for everything. I can't control for a 50-50 call where a referee might interpret things one way and call it a way that I would not have seen. But what we can do is create an environment where people can feel like they have the tools available and the problem solving and the team cohesion and the trust in each other, that even if we do wind up in the lose column, that we have done everything possible. We can be proud of our victory, or we can be proud of our effort, I should say. Now, does that mean that I don't like to lose? And I want to make sure that we do everything that we can. But at the end of the day, someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. But can we make sure that we facilitated an environment where people have felt like they're part of something bigger, that they're contributing to something bigger, that they feel included, they feel like they're part of a team, and regardless of what happens, they feel like they made their best effort to affect the outcome that we all hope for and desired. And we've had some ugly wins and we've had some brilliant losses. And I think over the years, we have continuously improved and felt comfortable knowing that we have spent the time together as efficiently as possible, but also recognizing that when that final whistle blows, someone's going to be happy about it and someone's going to be not so happy about it. But did we do everything we possibly could, knowing that we can't control for everything, to give us the best possible chance at victory?
So when I hear you, it's almost like we should find the sweet spot in preparation that just gives us peace of mind as a leader. Like, are we at that moment where, yeah, I'm at a good spot. Can I have peace of mind? And that's tough to find that sweet spot, right? Sometimes it does require shutting the laptop.
And
Jen,
I'll tell you, I was bad at it. I mean, I remember the first Armed Forces tournament where I coached as a head coach of All Navy. We were coming into day 2 and we hadn't won a game. And I walked into the hotel lobby to get a cup of tea and somebody asked me, like, "Are you all right?" I said, "I don't know." I don't know. But what I did know was that how I chose to respond to that situation and how I chose to respond to that situation with my team was going to be very important for us to come out of day 2 feeling a certain way. Either I could go with the hangdog expression, like, "Oh no, we're 0-3 right now and everything's caving in," or we could say, "You know what, Saturday's a new day. Let's get after it and let's figure out what we can do to be successful." So yeah, I definitely took time to adopt that attitude of, you know what, we did everything we could. And if we didn't, then we need to figure out what we didn't do. And then we need to make sure that we incorporate that into our training environment and into what we bring to the table.
awesome, Koma. So, Jen, would you like to ask your question?
Yep, just quickly, both of you have talked about setting the conditions to make your team perform, and I'm wondering just maybe a couple things, 2 or 3 things each that you could offer that you do like right away, behaviors that you don't tolerate, phrasing, any kind of just how do you do that? What are the couple things that you do to set those conditions immediately with your teams of people and your coaching teams as well?
Koma, you want to go first, or do you want me to jump in?
I'm happy to let you go first.
Okay. And so, yeah, so, I mean, a couple things that came to mind just quickly, so bear with me, but, I think one of the things that I really don't appreciate, and I think it really tried to, just eliminate entirely. It's just not a behavior that's tolerated, is finger pointing. Nobody learns from placing blame. And quite frankly, my thought is always, it doesn't matter who's to blame or what's to blame. It's really important that we understand what went wrong. We kind of AAR the situation, what went wrong, and what can we do better next time. But finger pointing is something that I can't tolerate. And I think a lack of the other thing would just be, it was really three things. So, finger pointing, excuses, which those kind of go hand in hand, and then just lack of humility. If people aren't humble, then they can't really be truly invested in something other than themselves, like a team. So, humility is huge. So those are kind of my three non-negotiables.
Wow.
And I think similar to that, I'm not always right. And I think a lot of times people wind up in a coaching situation where there's an assumption that the coach is always right, or people do not feel comfortable asking questions if they don't understand something. And I try to create an atmosphere where, look, I'm bringing to the table a lot of experience and perspective. I consider myself a student of the game, always learning, but I'm not always right. It's not coach's king or coach's queen. Like, we have to problem solve this together. And if it's a situation where, hey, maybe here's a play that we're going to run and it just doesn't work, let's throw it out. Because it's not about me forcing someone to run a play until it works. It's maybe this just doesn't work and we need to throw it out and let's work together to come up with a better solution. And I agree with the finger pointing. We don't have time. 14 minutes, you don't have time to finger point, because if you're finger pointing, you're not paying attention to what's happening. So something similar, specific to rugby, is if the penalty has been called, you know what to do. If it's for you, then we know what to do. If it's against us, we know what to do. But once that thing is done, we don't adjudicate it on the pitch. Get moving, because we don't have time to go crying over something that happened 2, 3, 5 seconds ago. We've got a job to do. So it's just next job. And the other piece of it is, I think that the aspect of humility, Dawn, that you recognize, like, we don't win with superstars. Like, that just doesn't work. And especially at the level where we're playing, if you have that person who's quote unquote the superstar, people will figure it out pretty quickly and shut it down. That we can't win with 7 people. We have to win with, in our case, a full roster, because it's not just the 7 people who take us out on the pitch as starters. It's not, I don't call them substitutes, I call them finishers, because we all have to work together to complete the job that we need to get done in that 14 minutes on the pitch, or in this case, at the Armed Forces tournament. It takes absolutely everybody to get it done. If you're in for 1 minute or 14 minutes, it doesn't matter. It's everybody working together, and everybody has a role, and everybody's work is valued.
I love this so much. Honestly, the non-negotiables that you talked about, Dawn and Koma, you kind of going into this a little bit more. I could talk about this all night, and we're at the top of the hour. However, though, I will want to talk about this all night at some point. If either of you ever would want to join me on my podcast, I would like to go deep into some of these things, because Dawn, something that, like, where I'm going to cut this off, where my brain's going right now, is like 2 of your non-negotiables are kind of related: finger pointing and humility, right? Because so, humility is like a continuum, right? And we have our moments, and finger pointing, as much as we're blaming, like, oh, you didn't do this or you didn't do that, the finger pointing goes the other way too. I did do this. Like, I threw 3 touchdowns this game, even though we lost. I'm good. I did my job, right? And that can be equally as frustrating as well, because if you're doing that, that would show a lack of humility when you're starting to do this, right? And same thing, finger pointing at everybody else, then becomes a lack of humility. So, man, I could go into this, and I would love to pick your brains ad nauseum for this, but I will let everybody go tonight. Thank you so much, Dawn and Koma, for being with us and just having this casual conversation and letting it all come out. I know I took copious notes, and I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be with us tonight, and all of our donors and sponsors to allow this to happen. Like, we do this because of you, and we just can't thank you enough, so we can keep preaching the importance of quality coaching in our communities. And there's no one better on this planet than our service members, veterans, most guys, and Girl Scout families to do so. So thank you, everyone. Hope you all have a great night.